Hey, welcome to the Dealmaking Podcast, Episode 3. I'm your host, Dan Del Real. If you're new here, this is a real estate podcast where we talk about deals, the people who put the deals together, and our goal is to unpack as much value as possible for your benefit. Now, it's been a few months since we launched our podcast and dropped a new episode. And just to give you a little backstory about what's been going on, we launched this podcast in Q3 of 2023. Towards the end of the year, one of my goals was to study and pass the California real estate broker exam. So I got really busy with that. And my thought was, hey, after studying, after I pass the exam, things will slow down and then I'll circle back to the podcast. And what ended up happening was I took the test in November. Then from then until the end of the year, my goal was to get all my paperwork submitted and approved. Then 2024 rolled around. We launched a brokerage. Since then, we've been just finalizing vendor agreements, getting things off the ground. And what I've realized is things are not going to become less busy. In fact, they're probably going to continue to be busy and get more and more busy. So we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to relaunch the vlog, and we're going to give you a behind the scenes look at me building the brokerage. In addition to that, we're going to strip the audio and put the content out as a podcast. All right, with that, let's jump into it. All right, so here's what's going on behind the scenes. Last week, Victoria and I took a trip to the Pismo area to recharge our batteries. And so we were gone, for a short trip, gone a couple of days. Then we came back and jumped into showing space. All right, so London Plaza, retail space available. Asking rent is $1.75 a square foot, triple net. Next on the list, we went to go take a look at 357 West Main. There's office space that's available. This is the Gottschalk building that was recently vacated by Gottschalk's Music. They moved down the street, and then we have a couple clients going in. One is a tattoo shop. The other is a pottery retailer. They're going in on the ground floor, and then upstairs, we're renovating the entire upstairs, just under 5,000 square feet of office space, newly refurbished. The asking rent is $1.25 a square foot, triple net. And so the pottery business, they're going to be opening up most likely in the next 4 to 8 weeks. The tattoo shop's going to be opening up later in the year. Additionally, we took a look at the Big Lots building. There's retail space that's there available at $1.39 a square foot, triple net. In its current condition, the space is an open shell with improvements currently being made. There's a demising wall that's going to go in, and it's going to go from one big open, almost 9,000 square foot space down to spaces that are closer about 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. Now, something to keep in mind, the asking rent is not the market rent. This is important if you're a tenant, if you're looking for space and you're negotiating on space. The asking rent is something that's determined by the landlord or their agent. I've seen a couple of different instances over the past 2 weeks, one from the landlord, another from the agent, where the asking rents were way above where the market was. So in one instance, the landlord was asking $2.35 a square foot. In another instance, the agent was asking $3.50 a square foot. So well above the market. If you're looking for space, you have a couple of different options. You could either try to find space on your own, or you can get an agent to help you find space, negotiate on space, and it's not something you have to do it alone. And if you don't have an agent, buyer beware, because there are landlords and agents that are asking some really high dollar amounts for rent. And if you're dealing directly with them, keep in mind the landlord or their agent, they're acting and negotiating for the benefit and in the interest of the landlord. So just because they're asking a certain amount doesn't mean that you have to offer the amount that they're asking. Everything's negotiable. All right, so if you're an agent or you're in the real estate world, one of the things that is on everybody's mind right now is the recent Sitzer Burnett case and the $418 million settlement that recently came against the National Association of Realtors, or NAR for short. Let's unpack exactly what that means. So, the problem as described in the settlement is the current system allowed agents and brokers to charge high fixed rates, and this contributed to inflated home prices. If you flesh that out, inflated home prices is really the problem that they're trying to solve. The verdict, what has been front of mind in the industry, and the thought was, hey, this is going to be appealed. Recently, the settlement was announced, and so that's created a lot of buzz over the last week or so. So the plaintiffs claimed real estate commission rates were too high, buyers' representatives are paid too much, and also NAR's Code of Ethics and MLS Handbook, along with the corporate defendants' practices, led to inflated commission rates, which contributed to inflated home prices. That's the perspective from the plaintiff. Now, let's take a look at the defendant, the National Association of Realtors. All right, so I'm going to share some information with you. This is from a statement that was put out by the National Association of Realtors that talks about the two key goals and then unpacks what the solution is. And really, there's 5 key areas of interest to pay attention to. So, from the beginning of this litigation, we had 2 goals: secure release of liability for as many of our members, associations, and MLSs as we could, and preserve the choices consumers have regarding real estate services and compensation. The solution: this proposed settlement achieves both of these goals. Here are the key terms. 1, release of liability. The agreement would release NAR, over 1 million NAR members, all state, territorial, and local realtor associations, all association-owned MLSs, and all brokerages with a NAR member as principal that had a residential transaction volume in 2022 of $2 billion or below from liability for these types of claims brought in these cases on behalf of home sellers related to broker commissions. NAR fought to include all members in release and was able to ensure more than 1 million members are included. Despite NAR's efforts, agents affiliated with Home Services of America and its related companies, the last corporate defendants still litigating the Seitzer Burnett case, are not released under the settlement, nor are employees of the remaining corporate defendants named in the cases covered by this settlement. 2, compensation offers moved off the MLS. NAR has agreed to put in place a new rule prohibiting offers of compensation on the MLS. Offers of compensation could continue to be an option consumers can pursue off MLS through negotiation and consultation with real estate professionals. And sellers can offer buyer concessions on an MLS. For example, concessions for buyer closing costs. This change will go into effect mid-July 2024. 3, written agreements for MLS participants acting for buyers. While NAR has been advocating for the use of written agreements for years, in this settlement, we have agreed to require MLS participants working with buyers to enter into written representation agreements with their buyers. This change would go into effect mid-July 2024. 4, settlement payment. NAR would pay $418 million over approximately 4 years. This is a substantial sum, and it will be incumbent on NAR to use our remaining resources in the most effective way possible to continue delivering on our core mission. NAR's membership dues for 2024 will not change because of this payment. 5, NAR continues to deny any wrongdoing. NAR has long maintained, and we continue to believe, that corporate compensation and NAR's current policies are good things that benefit buyers and sellers. They promote access to property ownership, particularly for lower and middle income buyers who can have a difficult enough time saving for a down payment. With the settlement, NAR is confident it and its members can still achieve all those goals. All right, so that was a lot of information. And if you're like me, you're probably trying to make sense of it all. What does that mean exactly? Here are 4 things you can take away from the NAR settlement. 1, things are changing. That's no longer being disputed. That's what the plaintiffs wanted. That's what NAR has agreed to. But it's important to understand, just because change is coming, that does not necessarily mean that home prices will fall and buyers will see cost savings. We'll unpack that in a minute, but just understand change does not equal home prices going down. Two, agents will need to adapt or die. So, literally, what will be required and the way that agents do business will be different than the way they did business before the NAR settlement. So if you're an agent, definitely understand you need to make adjustments. You need to figure out how do you change the way that you do business so you're not caught off guard and you can win in 2024. Three, not all buyers are the same. Buyers are different and they're going to be impacted differently. What I mean by that is, if you're a first-time home buyer, you don't have any experiential knowledge in buying a home. You're going to need a lot more help than someone who's bought 10, 15, 20 properties and is very familiar with the process. So this isn't a one size fits all solution for buyers. This is something that's going to impact buyers in different ways. In my opinion, a first time home buyer is someone who needs an agent the most. So definitely consider that if you're a buyer. And then fourth takeaway, good agents are worth every penny. So if you're a buyer and you have a good agent or you have the opportunity to work with a good agent, you definitely want to make sure that they're compensated. Whatever that looks like in the new, 2024 post-NAR settlement world, because good agents are worth every penny. Give you an example. We just closed escrow on a deal yesterday. It's an office building that's about 2,000 square feet. This was listed for sale early 2023, and the asking price was 625,000. Now, the property sat there. I represented the buyer in this transaction. We made an offer last year. This would have been probably about March, April, uh, below asking price. At that time, the seller wanted a really high number. We weren't able to put the deal together. That property eventually expired. It was no longer listed for sale, and we circled back to it early in 2024. So we ended up negotiating over, let's call it a 12-month period. We ended up getting the property under contract, and we just closed escrow yesterday at $285,500. That's a massive discount. That's a 55% discount from the asking price in early 2023. Now, if you talk to my buyer and you ask him, hey, was Dan paid too much for that transaction? He would probably say, no, I don't think he was. He helped me negotiate a 55% discount and I saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's just one example. I know plenty of amazing realtors and real estate agents who are going to negotiate a much higher cost savings than you would from getting a discount on a commission. And just because you pay less for a commission, that doesn't necessarily mean that your agent's going to be better or that the discount is better. In my opinion, the best agents are underpaid because if you're a seller, you're going to net a lot more if you have a good agent. If you're a buyer, you're going to pay a lot less, and the commissions are worth every penny. All right, so I said earlier, just because commissions are being changed, that doesn't necessarily mean home prices are going to fall. Well, what do I mean by that? Let's take a look at the real root cause. Why are home prices so high? Well, in order to understand why home prices are so high today, we really have to take a step back and look at what's happened over the last 5 years. So why are home prices so high? Largely, this is a supply and demand issue. And if you look at what's happened over the past 5 years, largely what's happened and played out has been driven by choices and actions by the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve policy, also government policy, both at the national and local level. This is why we are where we are today. This is why home prices are so high. So to give you an example of how things have changed over the last 5 years, at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I sold a couple of, at the time I was focused on residential real estate. I sold a couple of homes in Merced on Duke and Diane Court. These were 3-bedroom, 2 bath in North Merced. At the time, both of them sold for right around the $275,000 range. Now, today, these same homes in Merced would sell for somewhere right around 375, maybe 400,000, but somewhere in that range. We'll call it 375,000. That's about a 35% increase from 2019 to 2024. That's massive. Let's take a look at how we got there. So at the national level, let's look at COVID and the response from the government and also the Federal Reserve. So if you remember, COVID hit, nobody knew what to do. The government shut down the economy, and the reason that they gave for that was there was the pandemic and you needed to quarantine. Now, when that happened, there were issues with the supply chain. So if you can remember, there were boats that could not dock, boats were backed up, the supply chain was a mess. So the cost of labor and construction skyrocketed. And then with all the supply chain issues and the economy shutting down, this restricted the supply of new homes being built and coming into the market. After that, the Fed dumped $5 trillion approximately into the economy. The Federal Reserve lowered the interest rate to essentially zero. They were lending money to banks at 0%. They in turn were turning it around, lending it to people for 2.5% to 3%, a historic low. And the reason behind that was they were trying to soften the blow to the economy. They wanted to keep the economy moving. When that happened and buyers had the ability to borrow money at a 2.5% to 3% rate, their buying power was inflated and then also with the $5 trillion being dumped into the economy, people went on a shopping spree and they had a lot of buying power. This inflated real estate prices and demand skyrocketed. So it's important to understand the reason that home prices were inflated so quickly is because of the Federal Reserve and the government policy around COVID. Everything was lifted up by these super low 2.5% to 3% interest rates and $5 trillion being dumped into the market. That is why home prices are a lot higher than they were back in 2019. That got out of control and caused inflation. Again, supply and demand. If you have a small amount of something, it's valuable. If you have a large amount of something, the value goes down. So think about $5 trillion being dumped into the economy. That devalued the dollar. And that's exactly what happened. That's what we've seen over the past couple of years with inflation. Things cost a lot more today because of the decision by our government and the Federal Reserve. So now what are they doing? They're trying to get a handle and control on inflation. And so we've seen interest rates go from 3% to 7 to 8% where they've peaked. And now they're kind of starting to settle in right around the 6 to 7% range. All right, so it's a much different market today than it was a year ago or 5 years ago, largely driven by the decisions of the Fed and the government. All right, so nationally, there's a housing crisis. There's more people than there are homes. There's a strong demand for housing. So at the local level, Merced a couple of years ago adopted something called inclusionary zoning. So as the housing crisis continued, Merced doubled down on inclusionary zoning as a solution to the housing crisis. And they adopted that as a part of their current and future housing policy. So in April 2022, the Merced City Council passed a resolution that adopted an interim affordable housing production requirement at a rate of 12.5% for new private market rate development, meaning that 12.5% of new housing development should be developed for lower income residents, as well as provide in lieu fee options for developers to make certain housing projects economically feasible. What does that mean? If you're a developer and you're building new homes or apartments, 12.5% of that needs to be earmarked for affordable housing. Or there's a fee that you could pay to get around that. All right, so let's take a look at how this played out in real life. So I have a client who owned 30 acres on the corner of Gardner and Yosemite. This land is in the county, but it sits right next to the city. He had attempted to annex or bring the land into the city for a period of about 20 years. Now, at the end of those 20 years, he sold the land to a developer. This is the same developer that built the Merced station project right down the street. And what they were trying to do is get this project across the line. This was a mixed use project in the proposed annexation area. They had 560 units and about 66,000 square feet of commercial space across the 30 acres. So once they went to the city council to get this approved, and once approved, they would have the ability to build out 560 new housing units in Merced, and they would bring to the market another 66,000 square feet of commercial. So when the project went to the city council for approval in 2022, the developer was told in order for the housing project to get approved, they now needed 12.5% of the housing development to be low income housing. So, if you think about this developer, they have costs to build out this project. They were working, this project was 20 years in the making. A lot of the financials were based on market rents that are here. And then the city is saying, well, in order for you to get approval to build these almost 600 new housing units, you need to chop some of the rents down to a lower amount to help with affordable housing. Well, the deal didn't pencil. It no longer penciled out. The developer was unable to build it out and get the profits that they were planning on getting. So they ended up selling the property to another buyer. That buyer is still going through the process of the annexation. The plans were changed slightly, so it's going to look a little bit different when it gets approved. But that project has yet to be built, and that land is still in the county pending annexation. Fast forward next year. So in October of 2023, Merced City Council voted 6-1 to reduce the affordable unit production requirement from 12.5% down to 5% on all new single-family residential developments in pre-annexation areas, including major plan development around UC Merced. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I don't think that the city council wants to limit new housing, or they're trying to get in the way of new housing coming to the market. What I am saying is the policy that was adopted did get in the way of new development and new housing coming to Merced to the tune of about 600 units. So my argument is housing affordability is a supply and demand issue, which has largely been caused by the government at the national and local levels and the Federal Reserve. The impact of those decisions is dramatically higher than buyer commissions. Buyer commissions is not the root cause of housing prices being so high. So that's my take, but I'm interested to know, what do you think about that? Do you think housing prices are high because of buyer agent commissions? Do you think that supply and demand factors into the equation? Do you think something else? You tell me. I want to hear from you. And also, what are you doing to respond? Here at Del Real Commercial, we're adapting in real time. We believe now is the time to plan and strategize for the future. So some of the things that we're working on is training and coaching for agents. What we're really doing is, as we're building out this commercial real estate brokerage, we want to make sure that our agents have the best training, support, and mentors to help them win in real estate, so we can better serve the needs of our clients and also build thriving businesses in this new world of commercial real estate and real estate in general. We're also building out a creative agency to support our agents' efforts. So, from a marketing, branding, production standpoint, we want to make sure that we provide our agents with the best support so they can market their properties at scale and build their brand at scale. We're also doing some pretty amazing things with artificial intelligence. I really believe that AI is the future of real estate. It's already starting to dramatically impact the way that we do business. And quite candidly, if you're a real estate agent and you're not leveraging AI, you're going to get left behind. You need AI in order to compete in this new world. All right, so that's all I have for you today. Again, what do you think? Is changing the commission game going to help buyers? Or are we going to see home prices drop dramatically? Is this another example of government overreach? What's your take? Let me know. And also, I want to know, if you're a buyer, do you feel like your agents are paid too much? If you're an agent, what are you and your brokerage doing to adapt, change, and plan for the future? And also, if any of this brought you any value, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this podcast with other people to help us get the word out. Hey, thanks for taking time to listen. I look forward to hearing from you, and we'll see you next time.